Today, we will step into the brutal and captivating world of Roman gladiators, where every sunrise could be your last. Imagine the roar of 50,000 voices, the clash of steel, and the intoxicating allure of fame that could elevate a slave from the dust to immortal glory. This isn't merely a story of blood and sand. It's a tale of men like Flamma, who repeatedly refused freedom for the thrill of the fight, and Spartacus, whose defiance ignited the greatest slave rebellion in Roman history. Explore the surprising truths about their lives, their rigorous training, and the paradox of their celebrity in an empire consumed by death and spectacle. This was a time that existed at the intersection of captivity and possibility. Men from across the vast Roman Empire began each day with rituals that were both simple and profound. This time was around 260 BC to 400 AD. The life of a gladiator, so often reduced to moments of spectacular violence in our modern imagination, was in reality a tapestry woven from countless ordinary moments. Meals shared in companionable silence, hours spent in methodical training, evenings devoted to quiet conversation, and the tending of friendships that transcended the boundaries of nationality, social class, and circumstance. The true story of gladiatorial life reveals itself not in the roar of the crowd or the clash of weapons, but in the gentle rhythms that govern these men's daily lives. It was a world where former enemies became brothers, where the prospect of death paradoxically gave rise to communities bound by mutual care and understanding, and where the pursuit of honor and dignity found expression in ways both large and small. To understand what it meant to live as a gladiator in ancient Rome is to glimpse a society within a society, one governed by its codes, sustained by its traditions, and animated by hopes and dreams that transcended the brutal realities of their chosen profession. Believe it or not, there was such a thing as a gladiator school. The pathways that led men to the gladiatorial schools were as varied as the individuals who walked them, each representing a different facet of Roman society and its complex relationship with power, freedom, and survival. In the early morning light that filtered through the narrow windows of the gladiator barracks, one might find men whose stories encompassed the full spectrum of human experience, from the heights of military glory to the depths of personal desperation, from the violence of conquest to the quiet desperation of debt. The gladiator school was, in a way, wearing a coat of many colors. The largest group among the gladiators consisted of prisoners of war. These men had once defended their homelands against Roman expansion only to find themselves transported hundreds or thousands of miles from familiar landscapes to serve Rome's appetite for spectacle. These warriors, Gauls with their flowing mustaches, Germanic tribesmen with intricate tattoos, Thracians skilled in the arts of mounted combat, brought with them not only their martial skills, but also their cultural traditions, languages, and religious beliefs. In the enforced intimacy of the gladiatorial schools, these diverse elements gradually coalesced into something new, a unique subculture that existed nowhere else in the Roman world. The decision to become a voluntary gladiator was not made lightly, for it involved accepting the sacramentum gladiatorium. This sacred oath bound the fighter to endure to be burned, to be bound, to be beaten, and to be killed by the sword. By taking this oath, a free Roman essentially gave up many rights and privileges of citizenship, accepting a status of infames, meaning legally dishonored, similar to that of actors, prostitutes, and other marginalized groups. However, for many individuals, this sacrifice felt worthwhile when considering the alternative options available to them in Roman society. The transformation from a free citizen to a gladiator involved practical considerations that shed light on the social and economic realities of ancient Rome. Many voluntary gladiators signed contracts outlining specific terms of service, typically ranging from 3 to 5 years, or a set number of fights, after which they would be free to retire. Some negotiated for a share of the prize money and gifts they might receive from appreciative crowds, while others valued the assurance of regular meals and medical care provided by life in a gladiatorial school. Archaeological evidence from gladiator cemeteries, particularly notable discoveries at Ephesus, indicates that by the imperial period, a significant number of successful gladiators were, in fact, free-born Romans who chose this perilous profession. The tombstones found at these sites tell the stories of men who achieved considerable success in the arena, winning multiple fights and earning enough money to commission elaborate memorials that celebrated their victories and honored their memory. The Ludus Magnus was the primary gladiator training school located next to the Colosseum in ancient Rome. It was the Harvard or Princeton of blood and guts. This is where you would want to send your little Timmy to become a top-notch gladiator. The physical environment of gladiatorial schools was designed to serve multiple, sometimes conflicting purposes: to contain and control valuable human property, to provide facilities for intensive physical training, and to create spaces where men from diverse backgrounds could form the bonds of camaraderie essential for their survival. The largest and most famous of these institutions, the Ludus Magnus in Rome, exemplifies the sophisticated approach the Romans took to training and housing gladiators. Built by Emperor Domitian and later reconstructed under Trajan, the Ludus Magnus was a marvel of practical architecture that addressed every aspect of gladiatorial life. The structure centered around a miniature amphitheater where gladiators could practice their skills before small audiences of fellow fighters, trainers, and occasionally distinguished visitors who came to observe the preparation of their entertainment. This central arena was surrounded by rising tiers of seats, a cavea, that allowed spectators to evaluate fighting techniques and assess the readiness of individual gladiators for public performance. Around this central courtyard were arranged the various facilities necessary to maintain a community of professional fighters. The barracks consisted of small cells, approximately 8 by 10 feet, that typically housed 3 to 4 gladiators each. While cramped by modern standards, these accommodations were superior to those available to many free Romans of the lower classes. Each cell was furnished with simple but adequate bedding, and the close quarters fostered the development of intimate friendships among men who might face each other in mortal combat. The schools also included advanced support facilities that addressed the complex logistics involved in managing a group of gladiators. There were armories, armamentaria, for storing and maintaining weapons and armor, medical facilities, saniarum, staffed by skilled physicians, workshops for repairing and customizing equipment, and administrative offices for handling the business aspects of gladiatorial training. Notably, many schools featured elaborate bathing facilities, both hot and cold baths, that allowed gladiators to maintain personal hygiene while also providing opportunities for relaxation and social interaction. The daily routine within these schools followed patterns refined over centuries of experience. Gladiatorial training borrowed heavily from Roman military discipline, emphasizing regular schedules, hierarchical authority, and the gradual development of skills through repetitive practice. However, gladiatorial schools also developed unique characteristics tailored to the specific needs of men facing individual combat rather than coordinated military movements. The structured daily routine of Roman gladiators reveals that their lives were highly regulated and focused on training, meals, and rest. The day would begin before dawn with the unlocking of cell doors and the summoning of gladiators for their first meal. Strict silence was enforced during meals, serving both as a security measure and a form of discipline that encouraged contemplation and mental preparation for the day's training. The enforced quiet during these communal meals offered moments of reflection that many gladiators valued, providing a rare sense of peace in lives otherwise dominated by the constant presence of violence. The training program that transformed raw recruits into skilled gladiators was both physically demanding and intellectually advanced, reflecting centuries of knowledge about combat, conditioning, and the psychology of fighting. Modern analysis of ancient training methods reveals significant similarities to contemporary athletic preparation. These include carefully planned cycles of intense work and recovery, specialized exercises designed to develop specific skills, and a focus on both physical and mental conditioning. At the core of all gladiatorial training was work with the palace, a wooden post firmly driven into the ground that served as both a target and a training partner. Gladiators practiced fundamental cuts, thrusts, and defensive movements using weighted wooden swords, called rudis, that were significantly heavier than the metal weapons used in actual combat. This method of training, utilizing heavier practice weapons to build strength and skill, demonstrates the sophisticated understanding of athletic conditioning that Roman trainers possessed. A wooden gladiator sword, called a rudis, rests on a large stone, symbolizing the peace and freedom conferred during the gladiator ceremony. The rudis held significant symbolic meaning within gladiatorial culture, representing both the daily discipline of training and the ultimate goal of freedom that motivated many fighters. For most gladiators, this wooden sword was a constant companion throughout their years of preparation, becoming so familiar that its weight and balance felt as natural as the movement of their limbs. The relationship between the gladiator and the rudis was almost spiritual, a daily reminder of their current bondage and their hopes for eventual liberation. In addition to basic weapon training, gladiatorial preparation included a thorough physical conditioning program designed to equip fighters for the intense demands of arena combat. The renowned physician Galen, who served as a doctor for gladiators in Pergamon, documented many of the training methods used in these schools. His accounts give us valuable insights into the advanced athletic preparation of that time. Gladiators engaged in extensive rope climbing to build upper body and grip strength. They practiced balance and agility exercises using suspended shields and rotating apparatuses. Additionally, they performed what we would now recognize as plyometric exercises to develop explosive power. The specialization involved in gladiatorial combat required individualized training programs tailored to the specific demands of various fighting styles. A heavily armored myrmidon needed different preparation than a lightly equipped rhetarius. The training staff, primarily made up of retired gladiators who had survived long enough to share their expertise, understood these distinctions very well. The doctors who supervised the training were themselves veterans of the arena, men who had not only mastered the technical aspects of combat, but also developed the psychological skills necessary to face death with courage and dignity. One of the most remarkable aspects of gladiatorial training was its focus on teaching fighters how to die with dignity. This went beyond simply accepting death with stoic resignation. It involved maintaining honor even in defeat. Gladiators learned specific gestures and postures to signal their submission while still preserving their dignity. Additionally, they practiced techniques for falling and presenting themselves to their opponent in a way that might earn them the mercy of the crowd. This training highlights the complex relationship between violence and honor that characterized Roman gladiatorial culture. The psychological preparation for combat was just as important as physical conditioning. Gladiatorial schools developed sophisticated methods to help fighters manage the fear and anxiety that naturally arose from the prospect of mortal combat. Veterans shared their experiences with newer fighters, offering practical advice on managing pre-combat nerves and maintaining focus amid the chaos of arena fighting. Many gladiators created personal rituals, such as prayers to specific gods, lucky charms, or mental exercises, that helped them maintain psychological balance in the face of danger. The daily lives of gladiators unfolded within a structured environment that balanced the demands of intensive training with the human needs for rest, nourishment, and social connection. Men from across the Roman world formed communities in these gladiatorial schools, transcending the boundaries of ethnicity, social class, and legal status that typically divided Roman society. Shared meals were central to the development of these communities, despite, or perhaps because of, the enforced silence during dining times. The diet provided to gladiators was carefully calculated to maintain their strength and build a layer of subcutaneous fat that could mean the difference between a superficial wound and a fatal injury. The primary components of their diet were grains, particularly barley, which led to gladiators being mockingly referred to as horendarii, or barley men, supplemented with legumes, vegetables, and occasional portions of meat or fish. While this diet may seem monotonous by modern standards, it was a significant improvement over the nutrition available to many free Romans of the lower classes. Gladiators received 3 substantial meals daily, had access to clean water, and regularly consumed a distinctive drink made from plant ash that provided essential minerals for bone health and muscle function. This special beverage, analyzed by modern scientists studying gladiator remains from Ephesus, appears to have been an early form of sports drink, providing electrolytes and other nutrients necessary for recovery from intense physical training. The evening hours offered opportunities for gladiators to engage in activities that maintained their connection to the broader community beyond the walls of the school. Many gladiators were literate and took time to write letters to family members or friends, preserving relationships that provided emotional support during their years of service. Others engaged in games of chance or skill, shared stories from their homelands, or simply enjoyed the companionship of men who understood the unique pressures of their shared profession. The bonds formed between gladiators often transcended temporary alliances, developing into genuine friendships that provided emotional support and practical assistance. These relationships were complicated by the knowledge that friends might someday face each other in mortal combat. Nevertheless, evidence suggests that such friendships were common and actively encouraged by the gladiatorial school management. Men who felt genuine loyalty to their comrades were more likely to remain in the schools rather than attempt escape, and these emotional bonds motivated gladiators to maintain their physical condition and fighting skills. Romantic relationships added further complications within the restrictive environment of the gladiatorial schools. While slave gladiators were not legally permitted to marry, many formed attachments to fellow gladiators or to the women who worked in various roles within the schools, cooking, cleaning, or providing other services. These relationships, though officially discouraged, were often tolerated by pragmatic school administrators who recognized that emotional connections helped maintain morale and reduce the likelihood of escape attempts or rebellion. Some gladiatorial schools even employed women specifically to provide companionship to the fighters, understanding that emotional and sexual needs were part of maintaining a stable community of professional combatants. While such arrangements may seem exploitative by modern standards, they were viewed as practical necessities within the context of Roman society's approach to managing large populations of enslaved individuals. Evidence also suggests that successful gladiators sometimes maintained relationships with women outside the schools. In some cases, they were permitted to marry and establish families once they had proven their loyalty and reliability. Although the legal complications surrounding these arrangements were considerable, the practical benefits, for both the gladiators and the stability of the schools, often outweighed the theoretical objections. One of the most sophisticated aspects of gladiatorial life was the medical care provided to fighters, which often surpassed the treatment available to ordinary Roman citizens. The significant financial investment in trained gladiators made their health and physical condition matters of urgent practical concern for the owners of gladiatorial schools. This urgency led to the development of medical practices that were remarkably advanced for their time. The most famous physician associated with gladiators was undoubtedly Galen. His service at Pergamon from 158 to 161 CE provided him with extensive experience in treating traumatic injuries. Galen's innovations in wound care, surgical technique, and post-injury rehabilitation were specifically designed to address the injuries commonly sustained in gladiatorial combat. His methods were so effective that he claimed no gladiator deaths occurred under his care during his tenure, an impressive achievement given the violent nature of these contests. Galen's approach to treating gladiatorial injuries included several innovative techniques that predated modern medical understanding by more than a millennium. For injuries to the extremities, which were among the most common types of wounds, he developed a treatment protocol using wine-soaked linen and damp sponges to keep wounds moist. This method likely provided antimicrobial benefits, even though germ theory would not be understood for another 1,500 years. For deeper muscle injuries, Galen employed advanced surgical procedures, suturing multiple layers of tissue and even repairing damaged tendons, techniques that closely resemble modern surgical practices. The medical facilities within gladiatorial schools were equipped with instruments and supplies that reflected the serious approach the Romans took toward treating combat injuries. Archaeological evidence from various sites has revealed surgical tools, pharmaceutical preparations, and treatment areas that demonstrate the systematic nature of gladiatorial medical care. These facilities were staffed by physicians and assistants trained in the specific techniques needed to treat fighting injuries. Recovery and rehabilitation were given as much attention as acute care, with gladiators following carefully designed programs intended to restore their fighting capacity as quickly and completely as possible. Physical therapy, massage, and graduated exercise programs helped injured fighters regain strength and mobility, while dietary modifications and herbal treatments supported the healing process. The bathing facilities in gladiatorial schools played a crucial role in recovery by providing hydrotherapy and opportunities for gentle exercise in warm water. The psychological aspects of recovery were also recognized and addressed by the medical staff in these schools. Fighters who sustained serious injuries often experienced symptoms similar to trauma or depression. The medical protocols included provisions for counseling and emotional support. Veteran gladiators who had successfully recovered from similar injuries often served as mentors for their newly injured colleagues, providing practical advice and emotional reassurance during the healing process. Survival rates and outcomes for Roman gladiators show that death in the arena was much less common than popular culture suggests. When gladiators finally entered the arena for actual combat, they participated in events that were as carefully regulated as they were potentially deadly. Contrary to popular misconceptions fostered by modern entertainment, gladiatorial contests were governed by strict rules and were rarely intended to result in death. Modern analysis of historical records and archaeological evidence suggests that only about 10 to 20% of gladiatorial contests ended in fatality, with the majority of defeated fighters receiving missio, mercy from the crowd, and permission to live and fight again. The arena experience began long before the actual combat, with elaborate ceremonies and processions designed to heighten anticipation and honor the fighters who would risk their lives for the entertainment of the crowd. Gladiators entered the arena wearing ceremonial armor that was often more ornate than their fighting gear, processed around the perimeter to display themselves to the spectators, and participated in ritual salutations that acknowledged both the sponsors of the games and the gravity of the occasion they were about to commemorate. Yes, they had sponsors. The famous phrase, Ave Imperator, Morituri te salutant, Hail Emperor, those who are about to die salute you, was delivered not with despair, but with the formal dignity appropriate to warriors who had chosen to face death rather than live without honor. This ritual salutation served multiple purposes. It acknowledged the authority of the emperor and the legitimacy of the games. It demonstrated the courage and acceptance of the gladiators, and it provided a moment of solemn reflection before the excitement of combat began. The actual fighting was overseen by referees, summa rudis, who were usually retired gladiators with extensive experience in arena combat. These officials ensured that the rules of engagement were followed, monitored the condition of the fighters, and had the authority to halt contests when one participant was in mortal danger. Their presence demonstrates the systematic approach Romans took to gladiatorial combat, treating it as a regulated sport rather than simply a form of execution or random violence. The rules governing different types of gladiatorial matches were complex and varied according to the specific types of fighters involved and the preferences of the audience and sponsors. Some contests were fought until one gladiator could no longer continue, others until first blood was drawn, and still others according to time limits or other predetermined conditions. The variety of rules and formats helped maintain audience interest, while providing opportunities for gladiators to demonstrate different types of skill and courage. The psychological dimension of arena combat was as important as the physical aspects, with successful gladiators developing mental techniques for managing fear, maintaining focus, and reading the mood of the crowd. The ability to perform well under the intense pressure of public scrutiny, while simultaneously engaging in mortal combat, required a rare combination of physical skill and psychological resilience that few individuals possessed. The relationship between gladiators and their audiences was complex and multifaceted, involving elements of admiration, fear, sexual attraction, and social projection that reflected the contradictions inherent in Roman attitudes toward violence, slavery, and social hierarchy. Successful gladiators could achieve a form of celebrity status that transcended their legal classification as slaves or social outcasts, earning devoted followings among spectators who collected memorabilia, placed bets on their performances, and followed their careers with passionate interest. The proximity to death that characterized gladiatorial life fostered a rich spiritual culture that incorporated elements from across the Roman religious spectrum. Gladiators developed elaborate rituals for preparing themselves mentally and spiritually for combat, drawing on traditions from their homelands as well as Roman religious practices to create belief systems that helped them find meaning and courage in their dangerous profession. Many gladiators developed strong devotional relationships with specific deities who were believed to offer protection in combat or guidance in the face of death. Mars, the Roman god of war, was naturally popular among fighters, as was Hercules, whose legendary strength and endurance provided an inspiring model for men who relied on physical prowess for survival. Nemesis, the goddess of divine retribution and balance, held special significance for gladiators, who often appealed to her for justice in their contests and fairness in their treatment. The religious practices of gladiators also incorporated elements from the various cultural traditions represented in the schools. Celtic fighters might invoke their tribal war gods. Germanic gladiators performed rituals inherited from their ancestral traditions. And those from the eastern provinces of the empire brought mystery religions and philosophical traditions that enriched the spiritual environment of the gladiatorial community. Prayer and sacrifice were regular features of gladiatorial life, with fighters performing individual and collective rituals before training sessions, major contests, and other significant events. These practices served both spiritual and psychological functions, providing frameworks for understanding the meaning of their experiences and techniques for managing the anxiety and fear that naturally accompanied their profession. The approach of death, whether one's own or that of comrades, was accompanied by elaborate rituals designed to honor the deceased and provide comfort to the survivors. Gladiatorial communities developed their funeral customs that combined elements from various cultural traditions with practices specifically adapted to their unique circumstances. These rituals not only provided emotional support to grieving community members, but also served to reinforce the bonds of loyalty and mutual obligation that held gladiatorial societies together. The spiritual dimension of gladiatorial life also included philosophical elements drawn from the various schools of thought popular in the Roman world. Stoicism, with its emphasis on courage, duty, and acceptance of fate, held particular appeal for men who faced death as a regular feature of their professional lives. The Stoic ideal of maintaining dignity and emotional equilibrium, regardless of external circumstances, provided a practical framework for gladiators seeking to maintain their humanity in the face of dehumanizing conditions. For the fortunate few who survived long enough to earn their freedom, retirement from gladiatorial life opened possibilities that were both liberating and challenging. The symbolic wooden sword, drudis, that marked a gladiator's transition from fighter to freedman, represented not just the end of one phase of life, but the beginning of another that required different skills and presented different obstacles. The process of earning retirement was rarely straightforward, requiring not only survival through multiple contests, but also the accumulation of sufficient victories, prize money, or popular support to justify the significant financial investment that freedom represented. Some gladiators, like the famous Flamma, were offered the rudis multiple times but chose to remain in the arena, preferring the familiar dangers of combat to the uncertainties of life as a freedman. Those who did accept retirement faced the challenge of adapting skills developed for arena combat to the demands of civilian life. Many retired gladiators remained connected to the gladiatorial world, working as trainers, doctores, referees, or administrators in the schools where they had once been students. Their experience and knowledge made them valuable assets to school owners, while their continued involvement provided emotional continuity with the communities that had sustained them during their fighting careers. Other retired gladiators found employment as bodyguards for wealthy Romans who valued both their combat skills and the intimidating reputation that accompanied veterans of the arena. The knowledge that one's protector had faced death repeatedly and emerged victorious provided reassurance to clients who lived in the politically volatile world of Roman high society, where assassination and violence were constant threats. Some former gladiators used their earnings and fame to establish businesses or acquire property, taking advantage of their celebrity status to attract customers and investors. The skills required to manage money, negotiate contracts, and maintain public relationships were not so different from those needed to survive in the arena. And many retired fighters proved surprisingly successful as entrepreneurs. The most successful retired gladiators sometimes achieved remarkable social mobility, rising to positions of respect and influence within their local communities, despite their origins as slaves or social outcasts. Their courage, discipline, and proven ability to perform under pressure were qualities valued in Roman society. And some former gladiators even pursued political careers or accepted positions of civic responsibility. However, the legal and social disabilities associated with gladiatorial service, infamia, never entirely disappeared, creating ongoing challenges for retired fighters seeking full integration into Roman society. Even successful and wealthy former gladiators remained excluded from certain professions and social circles, serving as permanent reminders of their past involvement in activities that Romans simultaneously celebrated and condemned. The formation of families presented particular complexities for retired gladiators, many of whom had been separated from wives and children for years during their service. Some were able to reunite with families they had left behind, while others established new relationships and started families as freedmen. The children of retired gladiators occupied an ambiguous position in Roman society, legally free but socially marked by their father's history. Despite these challenges, many retired gladiators appear to have achieved considerable personal satisfaction in their post-arena lives. The discipline, courage, and resilience they had developed as fighters served them well in civilian pursuits, while the intense bonds of loyalty and mutual support formed in the gladiatorial schools provided networks of assistance and friendship that lasted throughout their lives. The gladiatorial games of ancient Rome created legendary figures, warriors whose names transcended the bloody sands of the arena to become immortalized in both popular culture and historical memory. These fighters, ranging from rebellious slaves like Spartacus to the Emperor Commodus himself, achieved unprecedented fame in Roman society, despite their often lowly social status. Their popularity arose not only from their skill in combat, but also from their representation of Roman values like courage, honor, and the ability to face death with dignity. This made them beloved figures among both the common people and the elite who filled the amphitheaters throughout the empire. Gladiatorial combat originated from ancient Etruscan funeral rites and developed into one of Rome's most popular forms of entertainment by the 1st century BC. These spectacles served various purposes beyond entertainment. They acted as political tools for gaining public favor and showcased the power and wealth of their sponsors. Gladiators held a unique position in Roman society. They were both despised as infames, social outcasts, much like prostitutes and actors, and celebrated as popular heroes. Their names were chanted by crowds, and their images adorned household items. The popularity of individual gladiators was driven by several factors. First, their skill and bravery in the arena captured the imagination of audiences who valued martial prowess and the ability to face death courageously. Second, successful gladiators could achieve significant wealth, with some earning 17 times more than a Roman army recruit, offering a pathway out of poverty that resonated with the masses. Finally, their stories embodied the Roman ideals of transformation and the potential for individuals to transcend their circumstances through courage and determination. Archaeological evidence reveals that popular gladiators were treated with considerable respect, buried with honor, and their tombstones recorded their victories and achievements. Some became so wealthy they could afford elaborate funerals, expensive weapons, and even their slaves, reflecting their elevated status despite their legal classification as social outcasts. Spectators watching gladiatorial combat in an ancient Roman amphitheater, illustrating the popular Roman gladiatorial games. Spartacus is arguably the most famous gladiator in history, known more for his role as a revolutionary leader than for his achievements in the arena. Born in Thrace around 103 BC, Spartacus served as a soldier in the Roman army before being captured and enslaved. In 73 BC, while training at a gladiator school in Capua, he orchestrated one of the most significant slave rebellions in Roman history. Visualize a rugged Thracian soldier, muscles shaped by battle and adversity. Spartacus, a name destined to resonate throughout the empire. But he didn't start as Rome's nightmare. When he was betrayed, captured, and sold as a slave, the future rebel was expected only to die for cheap thrills in the arena. Yet, from the moment he first touched sword to shield, crowds sensed something different: a spark, a wild dignity, and a refusal to die quietly. Historians refer to Spartacus's rebellion as the Third Servile War. It began when approximately 70 gladiators escaped from their training facility armed with improvised weapons. What started as a desperate break for freedom evolved into a full-scale war against the Roman Republic, with Spartacus's forces eventually swelling to over 100,000 followers, including escaped slaves, gladiators, and discontented members of the lower classes. Spartacus proved himself to be not only a skilled fighter, but also a capable military tactician, despite the lack of formal training among his diverse followers. His forces achieved several stunning victories against Roman legions, including successful campaigns where they outmaneuvered and defeated professional Roman military units. The rebellion posed such a significant threat to Roman authority that it required the deployment of 8 legions under Marcus Licinius Crassus to finally suppress it in 71 BC. The revolt's ultimate failure resulted in Spartacus's death in the final battle, though his body was never recovered. The brutal aftermath saw 6,000 surviving rebels crucified along the Appian Way as a warning to other potential insurgents. Spartacus's legacy, as a symbol of resistance against oppression, has endured through the centuries, inspiring various movements throughout history and cementing his status as the most recognizable gladiator name in popular culture. Training in Capua, Spartacus suffered the daily humiliations of gladiator life: gruel for food, mockeries from trainers, the cold iron of chains at night. Yet he secretly built alliances, learning the strengths and quirks of his fellow gladiators. Did you know? Roman records suggest his makeshift army's first weapons were kitchen utensils. The Great Wooden Spoon Uprising. Turns out bread knives can do a lot of damage in a pinch. When he finally orchestrated his escape with Crixus and 70 others, carrying stolen kitchenware, he quickly found himself leading a revolution. His success wasn't just in fighting. He inspired hope, pulling in outcasts from every corner of Rome. His enemies would say Spartacus was possessed by a frenzy for battle. But to his followers, he was the kindly leader who once turned down extra food so a sick companion could eat. In a strange twist, ancient writers describe Spartacus as having a prophetic wife who, before his enslavement, dreamed that a snake curled around his face would mean he'd be a leader of many, but meet a bad end. She wasn't wrong. Crixus, a Gallic warrior, serves as another prominent figure from the Spartacus rebellion, though his fame derives from both his role in the uprising and his prowess in the arena. Before joining Spartacus's rebellion, Crixus had established himself as a formidable gladiator, known for defeating much larger opponents in the arena at Capua. His strength and combat skills quickly elevated him to prominence within the gladiatorial ranks. When the revolt erupted in 73 BC, Crixus became one of Spartacus's most trusted lieutenants, playing a crucial role in the rebellion's early victories. However, strategic disagreements eventually led to a split in the rebel forces. While Spartacus favored escaping Italy entirely, Crixus wanted to remain and exact revenge on Roman high society. This fundamental difference in objectives caused Crixus to separate from the main rebel army with several supporters, intending to devastate southern Italy. Crixus's independent campaign proved fatal when Roman legions tracked down his smaller force in 72 BC. He died fighting alongside 20,000 of his followers near Mount Garganus. Upon learning of his lieutenant's death, Spartacus ordered 300 Roman soldiers slaughtered in Crixus's honor, demonstrating the deep respect and affection the rebel leader held for his fallen comrade. Crixus's story illustrates the complex dynamics within the gladiatorial rebellion and the personal bonds that formed between these warriors in their struggle for freedom. Crixus was big. Not Roman wrestler big, but if a bear arm wrestled a bull, Crixus would referee big. Hailing from Gaul, he quickly became the unofficial camp chef, the only gladiator to roast a whole boar over a spit in the Capua kitchen. It wasn't long before his quick wit and quicker fists made him a favorite in the training yard and the arena. Legend holds that Crixus could flatten a foe just by yelling. But his true strength was loyalty. When he and Spartacus escaped, Crixus took responsibility for rallying the wilder, fierce-hearted Gauls and Germans. Here's a fun fact. In the thick of battle, Crixus is said to have worn a single bright red feather, so his friends could find him in the chaos. It also meant every Roman archer could spot him, but subtlety was not his strong suit. His greatest trial came from his spirit. While Spartacus longed for freedom, Crixus craved vengeance. He broke off for a final, doomed stand, determined to make Rome quiver. His epic death, outnumbered, outmatched, undeterred, was so stirring that Spartacus ordered Roman prisoners sacrificed in his memory. Some say the Capuan arena fell silent for days after the word reached them. The boar of Gaul was no more. Flama's story begins in Syria. As a youth, he was fierce, stubborn, and the rumor went a terrible horse rider who much preferred solid ground underfoot. Once destined for obscurity, Flama was swept up in a distant war and sold off. But life's next act would turn him from a no-name prisoner into the arena's unstoppable flame. Flama stands out as perhaps the most successful career gladiator in Roman history, earning legendary status not only for his exceptional combat record, but also for his unprecedented refusal of freedom. Born in Syria, Flama's early life remains shrouded in mystery, though he likely began as either a prisoner of war or a dissatisfied Roman auxiliary before being forced into slavery and subsequently into gladiatorial training. Fighting as a secutor during the reign of Emperor Hadrian, 117 to 138 CI, Flama specialized in close-quarters combat against retiarii gladiators who wielded nets and tridents. His distinctive fighting style involved using a small sword and shield, while wearing armor that covered only half his body, making him a formidable and visually striking opponent. Over a career spanning 13 years, Flama compiled an extraordinary record of 34 battles, winning 21, drawing 9, and suffering only 4 defeats. What truly distinguished Flama from his contemporaries was his unprecedented refusal of the rudis, the wooden sword symbolizing freedom, on 4 separate occasions. This honor was rarely bestowed more than once, making Flama's repeated rejections virtually unique in gladiatorial history. His decision to remain in the arena despite multiple opportunities for freedom has puzzled historians, with some suggesting he found greater fulfillment, identity, and purpose in gladiatorial combat than he believed possible in civilian life. Flama's popularity extended far beyond the arena, as evidenced by his elaborate gravestone in Sicily, which records his achievements and was commissioned by a fellow gladiator named Delicatus as a tribute to his deserving comrade in arms. He achieved remarkable longevity for a gladiator, dying at age 30 when many of his contemporaries perished in their early 20s. His legacy as the Flame continues to burn bright as an example of dedication, skill, and the complex relationship between freedom and identity in the brutal world of Roman entertainment. Crowds swarmed to see the lithe secutor dodge, pivot, and strike with grace that seemed choreographed. However, Flama was more than skilled. He was either lucky or cursed. 13 years of fights, 34 matches, and still, he refused freedom 4 times. Romans joked that Flama must have lost the door key to the barracks, or, as Marshall quipped in graffiti, only the gods could remove Flama's helmet. Why did he stay? Some say he was a gambling addict, fond of betting on his survival. Others whispered he fancied a fellow gladiator, Delicatus, who later bought him a fancy gravestone. What is certain, Flama died at the old age of 30, a record rivaled only by Roman senators. Not bad for someone who spent his 20s dodging swords. Spiculus was smooth, handsome, and always conscious that the arena's spotlight brought both adoration and danger. Emperor Nero, the most eccentric of Rome's rulers, was obsessed with him. Spiculus faced match after match, somehow staying alive, and nabbing perks rivaling some of Rome's richest senators. Talk about climbing the social ladder. Spiculus achieved unprecedented fame and wealth as Emperor Nero's favored gladiator, representing the pinnacle of what a successful arena fighter could accomplish in Roman society. Training at the gladiatorial school in Capua, the same facility that had housed Spartacus, Spiculus fought as a Murmillo gladiator, characterized by heavy armor and a distinctive fish-crested helmet. Spiculus's rise to prominence began with a spectacular debut victory over Aptonidas, a veteran gladiator who had won 16 consecutive matches. This upset victory immediately caught Emperor Nero's attention, leading to an extraordinary relationship between emperor and slave that would define both their fates. Nero showered Spiculus with unprecedented rewards, including multiple mansions, slaves, and riches, typically reserved for military commanders who achieved triumph. The extent of Nero's favoritism toward Spiculus was remarkable even by Roman standards. The gladiator was granted the unusual status of landowner, despite being technically enslaved, and he even owned slaves himself. This elevation far above his legal social standing demonstrated the unique position that exceptional gladiators could achieve in Roman society. Archaeological evidence of Spiculus's fame includes a glass vessel discovered in southern France depicting his victory over another gladiator named Columbus, along with representations of other notable fighters. However, Spiculus's fortune was intimately tied to Nero's political survival. When the emperor was declared an enemy of the people in 68 CE and faced imminent death, he desperately sought Spiculus to help him commit suicide. Whether due to the inability to locate his champion or Spiculus's unwillingness to assist, the gladiator failed to answer Nero's final call. Nero subsequently died by suicide, stabbing himself in the throat with a dagger. Jokes spread that Spiculus, technically a slave, owned more property than the senators voting on the empire's future. His friends liked to sneak snails into his armor before big matches, considering them good luck. Once, Spiculus was said to have tripped on an escaped mollusk, then spun the accident into a dramatic recovery, slaying his opponent while the snail crawled across the sand. But fortune can turn on a coin. When Rome erupted in violence against Nero, Spiculus found himself on the wrong end of mob justice. The emperor's downfall spelled doom for his favored gladiator. As anti-Nero sentiment swept through the empire and statues of the fallen emperor were toppled, angry crowds caught Spiculus and crushed him beneath the falling monuments. His death symbolically represented the destruction of Nero's regime and served as a stark reminder of how quickly fortune could turn in the volatile world of Roman politics and entertainment. Marcus Attilius was neither slave nor convict, but a citizen volunteer. Why? Some say debts. Attilius claimed it was for glory. But his friends suspected he lost a bet. Either way, this rookie soon gained celebrity by besting the best. He started as an unknown. Newbie would be generous. And on his first day, he defeated Hilarus, Nero's prizefighter, with 13 wins. Attilius represents a unique category among famous gladiators. Free Roman citizens who voluntarily entered the arena to settle debts or seek fame and fortune. Unlike most gladiators who were slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals, Attilius chose his path, making his subsequent achievements all the more remarkable to contemporary Roman audiences. Despite entering the gladiatorial profession as a novice, in another notable bout, Attilius defeated Ratius Felix, who had won 12 battles in a row. These upset victories over established champions established Attilius as a formidable fighter and crowd favorite. The significance of Attilius's achievements was such that they were commemorated in mosaics and graffiti discovered in 2007, demonstrating his lasting impact on popular culture. His success challenged conventional wisdom about the sources of gladiatorial skill, proving that motivation and natural ability could triumph over experience and established reputation. His story resonated particularly strongly with Roman audiences because it embodied the possibility of social mobility and success through personal courage and determination. Born to be emperor, Commodus instead craved the thrill of gladiator glory. He fancied himself Hercules reborn, sporting a lion-skin cloak and bellowing out challenges. Emperor Commodus represents perhaps the most controversial and shocking figure in gladiatorial history. A ruler who abandoned the traditional dignity of imperial office to fight as a gladiator in the Colosseum. Ruling from 180 to 192 CEI as the son of the respected philosopher-emperor Marcus Aurelius, Commodus pursued gladiatorial combat with an obsession that scandalized Roman society and contributed to his eventual assassination. Commodus's participation in the arena was unprecedented among Roman emperors and was viewed as deeply inappropriate by both the senatorial class and ordinary citizens. Romans expected their emperor to campaign against barbarians and manage affairs of state, not engage in what they considered the degrading spectacle of arena combat. His gladiatorial activities were seen as unbecoming of imperial dignity and represented a fundamental abandonment of traditional Roman values. According to historical sources, Commodus fought in the Colosseum over 700 times, though his contests were carefully staged to ensure his victory. He typically fought from elevated platforms that kept him safe from real danger, and his opponents, whether gladiators, animals, or disabled individuals, were usually handicapped or instructed to submit. When facing gladiators, he used wooden swords, while training at home with steel blades, where he occasionally killed opponents during practice. The emperor's cruelty extended beyond rigged gladiatorial contests to horrifying spectacles of sadism. Cassius Dio recorded that Commodus had disabled men fastened together at the knees in the arena and armed them with sponges instead of weapons while he clubbed them to death, pretending to be Hercules killing giants. He also claimed to have killed 100 lions in a single day and once decapitated a running ostrich with a specially designed dart before mockingly threatening senators with the bleeding head. Commodus's gladiatorial career came at enormous financial cost to the empire, as he charged 1,000,000 sesterces for each appearance, making him the highest-paid gladiator in history while causing significant economic strain. His obsession with presenting himself as Hercules reincarnated, complete with lion-skin costume and club, further alienated both the elite and common people. The emperor's theatrical cruelty and abandonment of imperial duties ultimately sealed his fate. In 192 CE, after announcing he would inaugurate the new year as a gladiator, a conspiracy led by Praetorian prefect Latus resulted in his assassination. His death marked the end of the Pax Romana and ushered in a period of chaos and decline, making him a cautionary tale about the corrupting influence of absolute power and the dangers of abandoning traditional Roman virtues. Senators gossiped that Commodus was more showman than soldier. He even tried fighting wounded giraffes, let's just say, not the most fearsome foe. Eventually, his antics led to betrayal and assassination, plunging Rome into chaos. Still, his arena career set an unbeatable, if dubious, record. Carpophorus, famed as a bestiarius, faced every creature Roman animal wranglers could unleash: bears, lions, leopards, and even the occasional rhinoceros. He became a legend for dispatching 20 wild beasts in a single event, earning comparisons to Hercules and the undying envy of Roman zookeepers everywhere. Crowds swarmed to see the lithe secutor dodge, pivot, and strike with grace that seemed choreographed. However, Flamma was more than skilled. He was either lucky or cursed. Fans once tossed live chickens into the arena as a joke. Carpophorus, deadpan, simply caught one and roasted it after the show. Among his peers, he was known as the beast who beats the beast, a man for whom no fur or fang could inspire fear. These contests, called venationes, pitted men against dangerous beasts, including lions, bears, elephants, tigers, leopards, and rhinos, often resulting in spectacular and bloody entertainment for Roman audiences. Unlike many bestiarii who were condemned prisoners and forced into the arena as a form of execution, Carpophorus was a skilled professional who chose this dangerous profession for money and glory. His exceptional abilities earned him fame during the Games of 80 CE, ordered by Emperor Titus to celebrate the completion of the Colosseum. The Roman poet Martial wrote 3 epigrams celebrating Carpophorus's extraordinary feats, providing our primary historical record of his achievements. Martial's accounts, while likely containing poetic embellishment, describe remarkable accomplishments that captivated Roman audiences. According to the poet, Carpophorus defeated a bear, lion, and leopard, all in a single contest, and on another occasion, killed a fierce rhinoceros with a single spear thrust. His most celebrated performance involved dispatching 20 different beasts in one match, a feat that left spectators in awe of his skills. The poet compared Carpophorus favorably to mythological heroes, claiming he deserved all the glory bestowed on Hercules and could have easily defeated legendary creatures like the Marathon bull and the Nemean lion. Such hyperbolic praise, while reflecting poetic license, demonstrates the genuine admiration Carpophorus inspired among Roman audiences and the significant cultural impact of his performances. The profession of bestiarius carried an extremely high mortality rate, even by gladiatorial standards, making Carpophorus's sustained success all the more remarkable. His legacy as a conqueror of wild animals remains a fascinating chapter in Roman gladiatorial history, representing the empire's taste for exotic and dangerous entertainment that pushed the boundaries of human courage and skill. The gladiators, Priscus and Verus, achieved immortality through a single legendary contest that became the most famous gladiatorial match in Roman history. These two became the stuff of legend through a single unforgettable match on the Colosseum's opening day. Priscus, tall and stoic. Verus, quick and cunning. The Emperor Titus himself sat in awe as the two swapped blows, neither giving an inch, their swords flashing like lightning. Hours passed, sweat poured, and the crowd alternated between cheers and gasps. At one point, a stray dog ran across the arena, and both gladiators paused to let it pass, drawing laughter from the stands. In the end, with exhaustion setting in, they made history. Raising arms in mutual respect, they laid down their weapons together. No winner, no loser, just two champions, side by side. Emperor Titus, moved by their honor, granted them both freedom. Roman children would act out their battle for years. "I'll be Priscus this time?" And local jesters claimed the only thing Priscus and Verus couldn't defeat was indecision. This fight holds unique historical significance as the only detailed description of a gladiatorial contest to survive from antiquity, preserved in the poet Martial's Liber de Spectaculis. The contest between these two skilled fighters was remarkable for its duration and the equality of skill displayed by both combatants. According to Martial's account, both gladiators fought with such determination and ability that neither could gain a decisive advantage over the other. The crowd, initially calling for the match to end with the traditional missio, also known as mercy, became increasingly captivated by the display of mutual skill and courage. As the battle continued without resolution, both gladiators eventually acknowledged each other's prowess by simultaneously dropping their weapons in a gesture of mutual respect. This unprecedented act of sportsmanship electrified the audience, who cheered loudly at their honorable gesture. Emperor Titus, deeply moved by the contest's outcome and the gladiators' display of valor, made an equally unprecedented decision. In a remarkable break with tradition, Titus awarded the rudies to both fighters, declaring them joint victors of the match. According to Martial, this had never happened under any previous emperor, making Titus's decision a demonstration of imperial magnanimity that enhanced his reputation for justice and generosity. The poet used this event not only to celebrate the gladiators, but also to praise Titus's character, describing him as a ruler who obeyed his law while showing appropriate mercy. The match between Priscus and Verus became legendary because it represented an ideal outcome of gladiatorial combat, a contest where skill, courage, and honor were rewarded rather than punished. Their story continues to resonate as an example of how even in the brutal world of the arena, excellence and mutual respect could triumph over violence and death. The most popular gladiators of the Roman Empire achieved their legendary status through a combination of exceptional skill, dramatic personal stories, and their embodiment of values that resonated deeply with Roman society. From Spartacus's heroic rebellion against oppression to Flama's mysterious refusal of freedom, from Spiculus's meteoric rise and fall to Commodus's scandalous imperial participation, these figures transcended their origins as slaves and outcasts to become enduring symbols of courage, determination, and the human capacity for both greatness and tragedy. Their popularity reflected the complex nature of Roman society itself, a civilization that could simultaneously despise gladiators as social outcasts while elevating them to celebrity status due to their martial prowess and entertainment value. The gladiatorial games served multiple functions beyond mere spectacle, acting as venues for social mobility, political manipulation, and the reinforcement of Roman values, such as virtues and honor in the face of death. The real lives of these men, and sometimes women. There were female gladiators too, were marked by grit, wit, and a strange mix of tragedy and comedy. They faced not only roaring foes, but absurdities only Romans could invent. Through blood and bravado, they wrote themselves into history, and our imaginations as the troubled, brilliant, and sometimes wildly funny superstars of the ancient world. So, next time you picture the arena, remember, for every sword fight, there was a snarky joke, a lucky snail, or a kitchen utensil turned weapon just out of sight. The legacy of these gladiatorial champions extends far beyond their historical context, continuing to captivate modern audiences through literature, film, and popular culture. Their stories remind us that even in the most brutal and oppressive circumstances, individuals can achieve fame, respect, and immortality through exceptional courage and skill. Whether as rebels fighting for freedom, professionals pursuing excellence in their deadly craft, or symbols of the corruption of power, the most popular gladiators of Rome remain powerful examples of the human spirit's ability to transcend circumstances and achieve lasting recognition through extraordinary deeds. The stone columns and ancient walls of the gladiator barracks in Pompeii stand as a testament to historic Roman architecture. Modern archaeological investigations have dramatically expanded our understanding of gladiatorial life, providing physical evidence that both confirms and complicates the literary sources that have long shaped scholarly interpretation of these ancient warriors. The most significant discoveries have come from gladiator cemeteries, particularly the remarkable finds at Ephesus, where excavations have revealed not only the physical remains of fighters, but also detailed information about their injuries, diet, medical treatment, and social status. The Ephesus Gladiator Cemetery, discovered in 1993, contained the remains of 68 individuals who can be definitively identified as gladiators based on their distinctive injury patterns and the presence of tombstones depicting gladiatorial combat. Analysis of these remains has provided unprecedented insights into the realities of gladiatorial life, confirming some long-held assumptions while challenging others. The injury patterns found on the skeletons correspond closely to historical descriptions of gladiatorial weapons and fighting techniques, providing strong evidence for the accuracy of ancient literary sources. Perhaps most surprisingly, the chemical analysis of gladiator bones from Ephesus revealed that these fighters consumed a predominantly vegetarian diet, supplemented with a distinctive beverage made from plant ash. This finding confirms ancient references to gladiators as barley men, while also demonstrating the sophisticated understanding of nutrition that informed their training regimens. The plant ash drink appears to have provided essential minerals for bone health and muscle function, serving as an ancient equivalent of modern sports drinks. The physical remains also provide evidence of the high-quality medical care that gladiators received. Many of the skeletons show signs of healed injuries that would have been fatal without skilled intervention, and several display evidence of complex surgical procedures that demonstrate the advanced state of Roman trauma medicine. The fact that many gladiators survived serious injuries and continued fighting careers speaks to both the skill of their physicians and the value placed on preserving these expensive human investments. Excavations at gladiatorial schools have revealed architectural details that illuminate the daily lives of these ancient fighters. The barracks at Pompeii, preserved by the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 CI, provide a snapshot of gladiatorial life frozen in time. The small cells where fighters lived, the training areas where they practiced, and the common spaces where they gathered for meals and relaxation can still be examined today, offering direct physical evidence of the environment that shaped their experiences. The discovery of weapons and armor at Pompeii has provided detailed information about the equipment used by different types of gladiators. Many of these items show elaborate decoration and careful craftsmanship, suggesting that gladiatorial equipment served ceremonial and symbolic functions in addition to its practical purposes. The fact that few weapons show signs of actual combat use supports the evidence that much gladiatorial equipment was designed primarily for display and intimidation, rather than killing efficiency. Recent excavations at other sites throughout the former Roman Empire continue to expand our understanding of how gladiatorial culture adapted to local conditions and preferences. The discovery of gladiator-related artifacts in Britain, Gaul, Germany, and North Africa demonstrates the truly international scope of this institution and its influence on Roman provincial culture. Modern scientific techniques have also been applied to the study of gladiatorial remains, providing information that would have been impossible to obtain through traditional archaeological methods. Isotope analysis can reveal information about diet and geographic origins, while DNA studies may eventually provide insights into the ethnic backgrounds and family relationships of individual fighters. These scientific approaches promise to further enrich our understanding of gladiatorial life in the coming years. As we reflect on the lives of these ancient warriors, separated from us by nearly 2 millennia, we find ourselves confronting questions that transcend the boundaries of historical inquiry and touch on fundamental aspects of human experience. The gladiators of Rome lived at the intersection of freedom and slavery, honor and degradation, individual agency and social control, contradictions that remain relevant to our understanding of human society and the individual's relationship to power and community. Their stories remind us that even in the most constrained circumstances, human beings find ways to create meaning, form relationships, and maintain dignity. The friendships forged in the gladiatorial schools, the professional pride that motivated fighters to excel at their dangerous craft, and the spiritual practices that helped them find purpose in their suffering, all speak to the resilience of the human spirit and its capacity to find light even in the darkest circumstances. The gladiators also embodied a form of agency that was unique in the ancient world, the power to choose death with honor over life without dignity. This choice, while constrained by circumstances largely beyond their control, nevertheless represented a form of freedom that transcended legal and social definitions. In choosing to face death courageously, gladiators claimed a kind of moral authority that even their social superiors could not entirely dismiss. Their legacy, the colossal shadow of the Colosseum, still stretches across Rome at dawn. Still, nearly 2,000 years ago, its travertine walls trembled with a sound now lost to history, the thunderous roar of 80,000 throats greeting death as theater. What follows are 6 dramatic vignettes from the most extravagant spectacles ever staged under the imperial gaze, told as if you had slipped through time to find yourself in those marble seats, the metallic scent of blood-soaked sand rising. At the same time, bronze trumpets herald the approach of glory and doom. The morning air hangs thick with incense and anticipation as the first rays of sunlight pierce the fresh travertine of Rome's newest wonder. Emperor Titus emerges beneath his purple-fringed awning, his face reflecting the burden of recent disasters. Vesuvius had buried Pompeii just months prior. Plague ravaged the city, and devastating fires had reduced entire districts to ashes. Today, he would purchase the love of his people with a spectacle beyond imagination. Overnight, an army of slaves had raked the arena sand into pristine patterns, each grain soaked with costly saffron water to mask the stench of death that would soon follow. The hippogym beneath thrummed with nervous energy, 600 men laboring in the torchlit darkness, preparing to orchestrate the most magnificent entertainment in human history. Underground chambers, beneath the Colosseum arena, where gladiators awaited their fate. The bronze gates groan open, and hydraulic lifts clank into motion. Through trapdoors emerged a rhinoceros, its horn gleaming in the morning sun, followed by the lithe figure of Carpophorus, Rome's most celebrated beast hunter. The crowd holds its breath as man and monster circle each other on the blood-hungry sand. What happened next would be immortalized by the poet Martial himself. In a single, fluid dance of death, Carpophorus dispatched not just the rhinoceros, but a bear that charged from another lift, then a leopard that leaped from concealed scenery. The arena became a slaughterhouse painted in crimson, yet Carpophorus emerged unscathed, his trident dripping, his chest heaving but unmarked. 20 beasts would die by his hand that day, an unprecedented feat that left even jaded Romans speechless. As the last lion fell, Carpophorus raised his arms to the thundering crowd, blood painting his torso like war paint, the very image of Roman dominion over the natural world. The afternoon sun blazed mercilessly as two figures emerged into the arena, their bronze armor gleaming like molten metal. Varus and Priscus, names that would echo through eternity, saluted the emperor with the ritual cry, Ave, Caesar, morituri te salutant. For 15 grueling rounds they fought, neither able to claim advantage. Their shields splintered, plumes were torn away, and still they battled on, two perfectly matched warriors locked in deadly ballet. The crowd's chants grew deafening, Missio, Missio, begging for their release. But Emperor Titus held firm to his law. The fight must continue until one raised a finger in surrender. What he witnessed next was unprecedented. Both gladiators, pushed beyond the limits of human endurance, raised their fingers simultaneously. In a moment that would define his reign, Titus awarded both men their freedom, their wooden swords, and the palm of victory. As Martial would later write, "This has happened under no prince but you, Titus. 2 fought and both won." As dusk painted the arena walls gold, servants appeared carrying baskets of wooden balls. These were no ordinary tokens. Each was inscribed with prizes ranging from loaves of bread to golden vessels, from exotic slaves to suburban villas. As the balls arced through the air toward the cheering masses, citizens lunged and scrambled, their dignity forgotten in the intoxicating promise of imperial generosity. For 100 consecutive days, this magnificent madness continued. 9,000 animals perished, gladiators earned immortal fame, and Titus cemented his place in Roman hearts. The inaugural games had transformed grief into glory, a wounded city into an empire reborn through spectacle. For weeks before the games began, Rome trembled with the arrival of endless caravans bearing Dacian gold, exotic timber, and most precious of all, 10,000 gladiators from every corner of the empire. Trajan's conquest of Dacia had filled Rome's treasury beyond measure. 500,000 pounds of gold and 1,000,000 pounds of silver now gleamed in imperial vaults. The emperor intended to spend every ounce in the service of spectacle. On the opening morning, spectators gasped as the arena floor vanished beneath an elaborate recreation of the Carpathian wilderness. Towering pines rose from hidden platforms. Streams bubbled through channels carved in marble, and morning mist drifted from concealed vents. This was no mere decoration. It was the Dacian homeland, reconstructed in the heart of Rome, ready to become a battlefield once more. From the forest depths emerged captured Dacian warriors, their long hair flowing, their curved swords catching the light. They would reenact their final defeat, their homeland's conquest playing out in miniature, while 11,000 exotic animals prowled through artificial glades. Lions from Libya stalked between the trees, while Nubian elephants trumpeted their confusion at this strange new world. As the spectacle reached its crescendo, a lone figure appeared atop a wooden mountain, an actor portraying the defeated King Decebalus himself. The crowd watched in breathless silence as the drama unfolded. Roman cavalry closing in, the desperate flight through mountain passes, and finally, as recorded in history, the king's decision to die free rather than grace a Roman triumph. The blade flashed in the afternoon sun, and the figure crumpled to the arena floor. For a moment, 50,000 Romans sat in perfect silence, witnessing the symbolic death of an entire civilization. Then the crowd erupted, not in bloodlust, but in something approaching awe at the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Day after day, week after week, the killing continued on a scale that defied comprehension. 10,000 gladiators, more than many medieval armies, fought and died across 123 consecutive days. 11,000 animals from 3 continents perished in elaborate hunts that turned the arena into a charnel house. The logistics were staggering. Whole legions dedicated to animal capture, purpose-built ships to transport exotic beasts, and underground chambers that reeked of death and terror. As trainers struggled to control maddened predators, the economic impact was so enormous that it would reshape the empire's finances for decades to come. But Trajan judged it a worthy investment in imperial prestige. In the stifling heat of a Roman summer, an impossible sight greeted the stunned crowd. Their emperor, Commodus, striding onto the arena sand, dressed not in purple, but in the leather and bronze of a common gladiator. He believed himself to be Hercules reborn, and the arena would become his stage for proving divine might. His opponents, carefully selected criminals and weakened gladiators, faced him with blunted weapons while he wielded sharpened steel. The crowd watched in horrified fascination as their god emperor hacked through victim after victim, his blade singing through the air while his enemies fell like wheat before a scythe. On one particularly cruel day, Commodus ordered all of Rome's amputees and disabled citizens brought to the arena. Bound together at the knees, armed only with sponges, they were forced to face their divine emperor, wielding a club. He stalked through them like a hunter among trapped game, their pitiful cries mixing with the crowd's uncomfortable laughter. 100 lions fell to his arrows in a single morning, shot from an elevated platform that kept him safely beyond their reach. When he decapitated a running ostrich with a specially designed dart, he carried the bleeding head to the senator's section, the crimson neck gaping like a threat. The senators chewed laurel leaves to hide their nervous laughter, terrified that their necks might be next. Commodus charged 1,000,000 sesterces for each appearance, a sum that bankrupted the empire while enriching only his bottomless vanity. Over 700 times, he entered the arena, each performance more elaborate and cruel than the last. He killed 3 elephants single-handedly, slaughtered a giraffe, to the crowd's disgust, and turned public execution into personal theater. Yet for all his staged invincibility, fear haunted his eyes. When a gladiator named Sceva detected the emperor's trickery and fought back with real skill, Commodus fled the arena and dismissed the dangerous warrior, rather than face honest combat. The god emperor was revealed as merely a man, a mad, dangerous man, but mortal nonetheless. The crowd's gasps echoed off stone walls as water began pouring into the Colosseum through hidden aqueduct channels, transforming the familiar arena into an inland sea. Within hours, the sandy floor lay 15 feet beneath artificial waves, while full-sized galleys floated where gladiators had fought just days before. The engineering was staggering. Bronze-lined channels, waterproof mortar in the hypogeum, and drainage systems that could empty the arena as quickly as they filled it. The very walls seemed to weep with condensation as thousands of tons of water transformed Rome's greatest theater into a naval battlefield. Condemned criminals, their crimes forgotten in the magnitude of spectacle, manned war galleys flying the colors of ancient Athens and Persia. 19,000 men would die this day, not for their glory, but to recreate a battle fought centuries before their birth. Bronze rams crashed through wooden hulls, while arrows darkened the artificial sky. Men screamed as they fell into blood-tinged waters, their armor dragging them beneath the surface, while sharks, imported at enormous expense, circled hungrily below. The crowd roared its approval as history played out in miniature. Every death a reminder of Rome's dominion over both sea and time. As the last galley burned and sank, attendants dressed as Charon, ferrymen of the dead, poled through the crimson waters, collecting corpses. Mercury's servants followed, piercing each body with red-hot spears to ensure death was complete before the arena could be drained and made ready for the next day's slaughter. The water itself had become sacred, baptized in blood, and declared holy by priests who sprinkled it on altars throughout the city. For weeks afterward, Romans would speak in hushed tones of the day the sea came to Rome, bringing with it all the terror and majesty of Neptune's realm. As the morning animal hunts concluded and the arena sand was raked smooth, a more elaborate horror began. Condemned criminals were not simply executed. They were forced to reenact the great myths of antiquity, their deaths scripted by poets and staged with all the precision of Greek theater. A woman condemned for adultery found herself cast as Pasiphae, Queen of Crete. Bound within an elaborate wooden contraption shaped like a cow, she was helplessly exposed as a massive bull, maddened by fire and torment, was driven toward her. The crowd watched in fascination as myth became reality, legend transformed into execution. High above the arena floor, chained to an artificial mountain meant to represent the Caucasus, a robber named Laureolus awaited his fate. He had been cast as Prometheus, the titan who stole fire from the gods. But instead of an eagle sent to devour his liver, a massive brown bear was hoisted on ropes to his level. The bear, confused and terrified by its elevation, began tearing at the helpless man with methodical savagery. The crowd cheered as blood dripped onto the sand below, each drop a reminder that Roman justice was swift, creative, and final. What had been myth became memory, legend transformed into warning. Beneath the arena floor, the hypogeum churned with activity as slaves and engineers coordinated these elaborate executions. Hydraulic lifts raised and lowered scenery, trapdoors opened to reveal wild beasts, and the very sand could be transformed through hidden mechanisms into lakes, forests, or mountain peaks. The sounds were overwhelming. Creaking machinery, roaring animals, screaming victims, and above it all, the thunderous approval of 50,000 spectators. Oil lamps flickered in the underground chambers, casting dancing shadows on sweat-slicked faces as workers prepared the next mythological murder. These were not mere entertainments, but instruments of imperial policy, cultural expression, and social control on a scale unmatched in human history. From Titus's 100-day inaugural to Trajan's 123-day triumph, from Commodus's divine madness to the flooded battles that brought the sea to Rome, these spectacles represented the apex of organized violence as public theater. The Colosseum's sand absorbed the blood of countless thousands, Its stones echoed with the death cries of men and beasts from across the known world, and its underground chambers served as the final holding place for souls about to enter eternity. Yet in their scale, sophistication, and savage grandeur, these spectacles achieved something approaching the sublime. They were simultaneously the greatest shows on earth and history's most elaborate memento mori. The massive spectacles of imperial Rome, with individual events lasting over 100 days and single games involving 10,000 gladiators, reflected an empire at the height of its power, wealth, and cultural confidence. They remain unmatched in human history, representing not just entertainment, but carefully orchestrated demonstrations of Roman civilization's achievements, serving as both celebration and warning to subjects and enemies alike. In their unprecedented scale and sophisticated cruelty, the gladiatorial spectacles of the Roman Empire stand as perhaps the most complex intersection of politics, religion, and violence ever created by human civilization. Their legacy continues to resonate in modern culture, not merely as symbols of violence and spectacle, but as representatives of courage, resilience, and the complex relationship between individual choice and social constraint. The gladiators remind us that history is not merely the story of kings and emperors, but also of ordinary people who found extraordinary ways to maintain their humanity in the face of extraordinary challenges. In the quiet moments before dawn in ancient Rome, when the gladiators stirred in their cells and prepared to face another day of training, uncertainty, and possibility, they participated in rituals of preparation and connection that linked them to the fundamental human experiences of hope, fear, friendship, and the search for meaning. Their lives, lived in the shadow of death, but animated by the full range of human emotion and aspiration, continue to offer insights into what it means to be human in any age. The story of the gladiators is ultimately a story about the capacity of human beings to create community, find purpose, and maintain dignity even under the most challenging circumstances. It reminds us that behind every historical institution, no matter how alien it may seem to modern sensibilities, lie individual human beings whose experiences of love, fear, hope, and loss connect them across the centuries to our struggles and aspirations. In understanding their lives, not just the moments of spectacular violence that have captured popular imagination, but the quiet rhythms of daily existence that define their experience, we gain insights not only into the ancient world, but into the enduring questions that continue to shape human life. How do we find meaning in suffering? How do we maintain connections with others in the face of competition and conflict? How do we balance individual desires with social obligations? How do we face the prospect of death with courage and dignity? The gladiators of Rome, in their complex and contradictory existence, offer no simple answers to these questions. But in the record of their lives, preserved in stone inscriptions, archaeological remains, and literary sources, they provide testimony to the remarkable capacity of human beings to find ways of living with purpose and connection, even in the most challenging circumstances. Their legacy is not one of violence and spectacle alone, but of resilience, community, and the enduring human search for meaning and dignity in the face of mortality.